All right, we're live, everybody. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. We got a couple trolls. I'm probably going to wait 3 minutes to get started with the documentary and just answer a couple of the troll questions. So Frank says, will you please debunk the books and Frank and Elie Wiesel next? Well, Frank, I don't rely on my understanding of Holocaust history on those books at all, so it wouldn't be relevant. In terms of the Anne Frank diary, I don't see what problem you'd have with the historicity of that book. I mean, she doesn't. The book is basically about the girl fleeing from her community in Germany, going to the Netherlands, and hiding in an annex to an attic. Um, throughout the war, and then she's captured. So I don't know what you'd find historically inaccurate about that account. Maybe you could elaborate. Um, They're an eagle again. Like you can cherry pick outrageous, absurd testimonies. I've made this point many times before. In the Battle of Mons, the soldiers claimed they were terrestrial. They were extraterrestrial beings, supernatural beings in the battlefield. Doesn't mean World War One didn't happen. Doesn't mean the Battle of Mons didn't happen. So these are really dumb arguments. What it means is that this account, it says bear and eagle, is not credible. So, um, would you debate run-ons? Yeah, I would definitely be willing to debate these people you're mentioning, on the right circumstances, if they were willing to let me speak. Maybe a written debate would be good. I'm thinking of writing something for Unz's review, but I don't have any contacts with him, paleoconservative Australian. So that's the problem here. I tried to reach out to Steve Saylor the other day, and we corresponded a bit on Twitter, but I think he just forgot the dropped the ball in our exchange. I don't think he was ignoring me or anything because he's sympathetic to my views on this, but maybe I'll email him again. Yeah. T-Mac, are you the guy who debated Mike Pina versus Holocaust? Yes, indeed. The problem is the thing got removed by YouTube, and YouTube also suspended my account for weeks. In point of fact, my account isn't going to be able to be monetized until September, even though we're close to meeting monetization standards with subscribers because of what YouTube said about that stream. I don't really understand why they shifted position, given that I debated deniers multiple times before, but they've made it plain that you can't debate deniers on their platform, and I have to abide by that. T-Mac, no, sorry, I just read that. Future, it's not cherry picking. There are hundreds of such stories. Show me the hundreds of wacky accounts. The problem you guys have with cherry picking one story here, two stories there that are wacky, is first of all, it doesn't prove anything since traumatized people say weird things, whether it's war veterans, genocide victims, etc. This isn't unique to the Holocaust. Second of all, the problem you guys have is it's all witnesses. You have to discredit all witnesses because all witnesses say, with regard to the Einsatzgruppen, we were in the case of perpetrators, or we saw Jews being systematically killed. All witnesses in the Reinhardt camp say the Jews were being exterminated. And all witnesses in Auschwitz-Birkenau who worked in the actual facilities, right? I'm talking not about everyone at Auschwitz, but people who worked in the gas chambers, the Sonderkommando, and the Nazis said we were exterminating Jews. So the problem you have is it's all witnesses, and also another problem you have is that witnesses are just one piece of the puzzle. There's documentary evidence. There's mass graves loaded with ash at Belzec and Sobibor that have been uncovered through archaeological investigation. There's forensic evidence at Auschwitz hydrogen cyanide in the gas chamber ruins that exceeds that of any other facility, except non-homicidal gas chambers, etc. It's just one piece of the puzzle. If only Ernst Zündel were still alive. I would have liked to debate Ernst Zündel on Nazi UFOs, flying saucers. I think he believed there was flying saucers. So, all right, I'm gonna check, see things, see if people are going to come. Other people who I think want to come are going to come. And if not, we will get started with the documentary. You guys can keep asking questions if you wish. By the way, in hope of preserving the channel, we're not going to be able to have playbacks of chat. So I'm willing to let chat be a little wild, but playbacks are not going to happen because I don't want my channel to be deleted. So sorry about that. Okay, checking out my phone, we got 15 watching. I would have liked to see more than that. Maybe we'll wait 2 minutes. Yeah. Luke Croft, History Speaks, am I blocked? I don't know why you would be, Luke. I like you a lot. So I have no idea how YouTube functions. Hey, denying. Nice to see you. Looks like some people are pouring in. Um, I'll tweet this out really quick because I've done it already, but you gotta really spam when you're doing a stream. I've learned that. So I'm gonna just tweet this out, and then we're gonna go, guys, right into greatest story never told. Because I've gotten, I mean, through many boomer tech failures, I've finally gotten understand how to stream, even though I'm, it's still a work in progress, but at least I can do it, right? So it's a victory. That's on Sneeder's. I don't really have that. So okay, we'll just wait. We'll just wait 2 minutes. Oh, your previous comments didn't show up, Luke. Yeah, it's a mystery to me. There's more censorship on this channel for sure than there has been. Um, I'm not the one doing it, although I'm willing to do it. If I need to preserve my channel, but I don't know if you said something that some woke blue-haired girl doesn't like. That probably is you know. Okay, switch to live chat. Yeah, I think I will switch to live chat from Mossad. Okay, we found the wrong side. The bad guys. I mean, if you claim to be pro-European, I don't know how you can say, the bad guys won. I mean, do you think the Poles were the bad guys whose city was razed, Warsaw out of spite, whose people were ethnically cleansed, whose talking about Christian Poles now, whose kids were kidnapped if they were deemed Aryan and murdered in the case of Zamosk and the Vartagau if they weren't in 1942. I'm not sure how you can view that as good guys if you claim to be pro-Christian or pro-white people or what have you. We're going to start in 1 minute, by the way. 24, all right. That's a little disappointing, but it's okay. Lawyer Tiger writes, the UNS review might be a waste of time when other Jewish writers were to post just addressing the JQ obsessions and authors that did not go over well. Look, here's the thing, lawyer. Right, I hear you. If you're in the Discord, you'll see there's another guy whose mind I changed, who's there, right? You gotta, it's an exhausting process, but you have to go for the 5%, the 3%, the 4%, whose minds are changeable. You're not going to get most of these people ever, but you can get some of them. And if you're compelling enough and you're well informed enough, as I am, you are not going to have people on our side of the scale, right? People who believe the Holocaust happened and don't believe in Jew theories. You're not going to have them move to the other side. So I think it's a worthwhile enterprise, even though it's rather exhausting, because as you say, the majority are going to no matter what article I write, the majority will disagree with me on this because they're neo Nazis, TFG at this point. But some might be movable. I think at that website, some might be, especially since 4, 5, 6 years ago they were. All right, we're gonna start, gentlemen, on maybe a lady or two on Greatest Story Never Told, Debunking. This movie's like 85 hours. We're not going to go through every bit of it. What I am going to do is go through with sources. I don't have sources for everything I'm going to say, but for the vast majority. And I'm going to go through with sources and debunk portions that I think are important and are clearly wrong. The drill is going to work like this. I'm going to play the thing. I'm not going to talk while it's playing for like a 1 minute clip, a 50-second clip, 30-second clip, und so weiter, as the Germans say, and so on. And then I will debunk. So without further ado, let's give the Führer, or give den Führer, or give dem Führer, you'd say, actually, grammatically. Give dem Führer his adieu, and let's listen to The Greatest Story Never Told a bit. Okay, so here we're going to look at a bit of content about Hitler and the Autobahn, Hitler and the 40-hour work week, and the economy, and so on. This isn't going to be our main focus, but we'll look at this a little bit. So, let's play it. This is a real whopper here. Hitler, the first in Europe to introduce the 40-hour work week. I'll just flag that I have to stop this here. Um, Completely absurd. In fact, in point of fact, obvious like the 8-hour work day, which is the antecedent to the 40-hour work week, emerges in 19th century labor movements. It's legislated in Poland, in Spain, in Sweden, and other European countries decades before Hitler comes to power in the early 20th century. Um, and in fact, point of fact, the working hours go up in the Hitler regime. So this is just utter nonsense. Some of this, if they said earlier, isn't made up. The economy improved dramatically under the Nazi period, but this is a pretty radical. I mean, and some of it's like half made up, like the animal protection stuff. They did pass laws, but they weren't really enforced, like against vivisection and so on. But this is just a whopper here with the first in Europe to introduce a 40-hour work week. Just if you want to live in a fantasy world, Nazis enjoy that, but it's made up. So, like, again, total whopper. They may have had this rhetorical commitment to eliminating usury. That isn't how modern economics work. Hjalmar Schacht, who was in charge in the early years of Nazi economic policy and was, you know, we might call a neoliberal in kind of anachronistic language, was not against usury. This is pure rhetoric and anti-Jewish rhetoric, so totally made up rubbish from the story we're told there. Okay, and then we have I think I won't quibble with this at the end very much because it's not true, but it's exaggerated more than a lie. So yeah, you can if you want a fact to Hitler's economic recovery, you can do that because there was an economic recovery. I'll bring up one source here about this stuff from Maxine Sweezy's The Structure of the Nazi Economy. So as you can see here, so the film made 2 points there really. The first one is that the Nazis had this historic, amazing economic recovery. I'm not going to quibble with that. The economic recovery was impressive. The language they're using is exaggerated. I don't think it's worth really talking about that much, though. The second thing they're saying is that Nazi Germany was so that's the first thing. Whatever. Let's ground it for argument's sake. The second thing they're saying in this economic part is that this regime was so friendly to the interest of workers, right? But as you can see from these data, which is from a book, Maxine Sweeney's Structure of the Nazi Economy, the percentage of total wealth in Nazi Germany. So we're not just talking salary, wages, obviously, but we're talking pensions and so on. It drops pretty dramatically in the Nazi period relative to, because you can see here, you have 1929 here. It's rather blurry. My apologies. 1930, 1931, 1932, and then Hitler comes to power in 33. You have a big drop where you go from 74.1 to 63.7, whereas the total amount gained from property and also profits, as you can see here, is much higher. So economic recovery, absolutely. Impressive one, absolutely. But workers get a much lower share, a substantially lower share of national income and prosperity than they had before the Nazis and they had in the Weimar years. Pensions are cut, as you can see, pretty dramatically from this, right? 18.3% versus 9.5%. So economic recovery, yes, but they did not make reforms to favor the working class. They made reforms to favor the wealthy and capitalists. And, so yeah. And then also interest and dividends is funny there because the film says interest and dividends didn't exist in Nazi Germany. So that's funny. Anyway, to it. Okay. So now we're going to move forward a little bit and hear about the Anschluss. By the way, the big focus I'm going to have on this film is about the war and the Holocaust. I'll say this. The first bit where they talk about Hitler as a kid and Hitler in World War I, it is not as egregious. Now, they're romanticizing it, but Hitler was a conscientious soldier in the First World War. The accounts that he was a coward because he was a dispatch runner. First of all, he was in the infantry for a period and fought in battles. So, okay, I mean, there's that. But second of all, dispatch runners, while it's not the most romantic role, you're delivering messages from one side of the front to another, they had a high mortality rate. So to call Hitler a coward, to say he wasn't a conscientious soldier is not well supported. There was a book, Hitler's First War, that tries to insinuate this. Not really so much in the book, but in the interviews he did. But it's kind of dumb. Hitler was a brave soldier in the First World War. So they romanticize that. Whatever, I don't care really. It's not made up. So okay, but the real lies of the war, the Holocaust, that is a doozy, and that's coming. So all right, we're gonna go now to the Anschluss. Yeah, I mean, you're just dumb if you accept this on face value. Now, did the majority of Austrians? So, the theme of this stream, I think, will be that the film gets more crazy and more outrageously lying as it goes. So, even here, okay, it is true, according to most data, that the majority of Austrians supported unity with Germany, right? So, that's not. uh, Austrians today would say, no, we were a victim or whatever. That's their national narrative at any rate. But most of them saw themselves as not only saw themselves as Germans, but favored unity with Germany. This vote, though, on the other hand, was a total joke. It was born of a massive intimidation, um, even like the physical ballot presented in this salient, glowing fashion. The vote for the Anschluss and this teeny, shabby-looking, circle or square, whatever the hell it was, for voting no. And there was massive physical and social intimidation with the German army having marched in and so on. So yeah, it's nonsense to claim that this is what 99.7% of Austrian citizens thought, although the large majority is probably true. So, ah, so again, we're not at the level yet where this is such a there. I mean, we had the 40-hour work week, which was totally bananas, usually abolished, so total lies there. But this one, still a lie, but like we've had worse. We've seen worse in online documentaries. So maybe I'm picking on this film too much, but am I? We'll see. We'll see, won't we? All right, now we're gonna fast forward to, and then for fucking Christ's sake, this didn't crash. Okay, now we're gonna fast forward to massacre of Czechs. The claim that Hitler was forced to do war or whatever. All right, let's do it. It starts to get really crazy now, guys. So get ready. Get your crazy sunglasses on or whatever, if that's a thing. Okay. Total fabrication does not exist. No evidence. There's not Czech violence, systematic Czech violence, significant Czech violence against ethnic Germans. So that's just total fabrication. The motivation is revanchism and the desire to be with co-ethnics, more than revanchism, really, for the Sudeten Germans. So just made up nonsense there. I'm going to show a couple sources now and show that describe the actual motivation at hand here. Okay. So we have the Munich Agreement, of course, where Sudetenland, the Germanic part of Czechoslovakia, as the film says, it's a multi-ethnic state formed in the aftermath of Warsaw. The Germanic part is given to the Germans with the acquiescence of the Western Allies. Oh, the Western Allies at this point, the British and the French at Munich. All right. So this is confirmed in September 1938. So 3 weeks later, Kershaw's a Hitler biography. 3 weeks later, after he gets the German population, the German majority regions of Czechoslovakia, and publicly in a speech says, I have no more territorial claim in Europe because I've gotten Sudetenland. Hitler gives the Wehrmacht a new directive to prepare for the liquidation of the Czech state. Right? He's breaking the Munich Agreement. He's planning to invade and annex portions of Czechoslovakia that have no historical connection to Germany, have no German majority. There's no massacres going on, all made up, naked aggression. And this is part of why the rhetoric you sometimes see around Hitler can be rather simplistic, because he is an anomaly in history insofar as his aggressions are so bald and unhinged. He's gotten what he wanted, reportedly. He's gotten what he claimed would be his final territorial claim, the Sudetenland. 3 weeks later, he wants to liquidate all of Czechoslovakia. So you tell me. And there's absolutely no evidence of this nonsense the film says about massacres or whatever. Okay. Here's another thing that the film omits. So this is many months later, where they're actually carrying out. They're prepared to carry out the invasion they've mobilized. It's 14 March 1939. So the president of Czechoslovakia, Hacha, is summoned to Berlin, and he goes. He has to go, essentially, because he knows Germany has mobilized, and he wants to desperately negotiate. Hitler and his goons tell Hacha that the entry of German troops was irreversible to Czechoslovakia as a whole. There's no justification for this. It's not revanchist. There's no massacres going on. This is naked aggression. Hacha is horrified, particularly given the strategic locations of the land that he gave up to Germany in Munich, the Germanic majority land, Sudetenland. There's no plausible way that Czechoslovakia can defend itself. Also, the Soviet Union isn't. They were willing to mobilize during the Munich crisis, but they're not anymore. They don't trust the West. So basically, Hacha knows he's screwed if he fights. He says he wants no bloodshed, but wants to negotiate, as you can see. Hitler refused. It was impossible. I'm reading from here now. The troops were already mobilized. Goering intervened to add that his Luftwaffe would be over Prague by dawn. It was in Hacha's hands whether bombs fell on this beautiful city. At this threat, the Czech president fainted. So they're coercing Hacha to give up his country. Some Nazi apologists in this film will say, oh, Hacha invited them in. But you can see 3 weeks after Munich, Hitler already planned to invade Czechoslovakia. Hacha only invited the Germans in the face of threat of invasion and threat to bomb Prague, a beautiful European city with zero provocation. And again, this has no historical connection to Germany. Prague is not a Germanic land. This is naked aggression. And the film is lying when it claims the motivation and the context was massacres of Germans by Czechs. It's straightforward aggression. It doesn't mean Hitler is entirely a one-dimensional personality, but he's an interesting personality. He's a monster, but he's a human being. A historical monster, but a conscientious soldier who loved his mother, right? Who gave up much of his orphan's pension to help his mother. So he's not a one-dimensional person. He's a human being and a monster. But his aggression is one-dimensional. The revanchism is a sham. It's an obvious sham, and you're a child if you deny that with respect to Czechoslovakia and Poland and so forth. Okay. All right. The film is a little bit chronologically weird. So they talk about Czechoslovakia, and then we'll keep going. Okay. Okay. So the implication here is that the pogroms emerged in a fashion. You get this from David Irving too, although not the same with Goebbels. You get with David Irving with respect to Hitler, but implication, the line of argument is similar to Irving's, just with different personalities. So the claim here is that Goebbels wanted to stop the violence. He didn't like it. He thought it would derail international trade talks about the Jewish trade embargo, or whatever rubbish the film is talking about there. So let's look at the actual facts of Goebbels' attitude incidentally, from Irving's work. Okay, so this is the reaction to Goebbels when, according to Irving's translation, not mine, when from Goebbels' diary, when Kristallnacht breaks out. Now the people's fury is aroused. This night it is impossible to do anything else against it. Not that I want it. Let it rip. And then to move forward a little bit, as I drive back to the hotel, there is a sound of broken glass. Of breaking glass. There is no danger to German property. So I'll leave it to you to interpret whether Goebbels was opposed to Reich Kristallnacht as his film and tries to stop it as his film implies. So, all right, before we go to, let's see what you guys are up to. Okay. Any questions, gentlemen? Comments I'm not going to respond to. I'm going to just move forward. If you have any questions, otherwise I'll take a sip of water. Keep talking. 20 seconds for one of you to ask a question on the shit I've talked about so far. If not, we're going to move on. Okay, I have a question for you guys. How bad is the lag? I see this buffering shit. How common has this been in the stream? I'm at a hotel. Theoretically, the internet should be perfect. Apparently not. You guys are talking to each other. You're not really responding to me, which is funny, but okay. I'm going to move on. We're going to now look at the film's discussion of the Haavara Agreement. Initially, the Haavara Agreement did allow Germans to immigrate with some level, German Jews to immigrate with some level of their property intact. Not all of it. They were also looted, but it varied by individual to individual. The extent to which corruption was involved versus policy varies, and therefore also the amount to which a person was looted varies. But there was systematic looting too. So they're not telling the truth about that. They are telling the truth about the Haavara Agreement existed, and the Germans kind of took, cynically or not, a pro-Zionist stance in the early years. However, as we'll see, the film is lying to claim that this never changed. The Germans eventually changed their views by the late 1930s and concluded, no, we're against Zionism because this will be the Jewish headquarters for criminality. So they come out forward in some weird way in 1933. There's also a very interesting book by Francis Nicosia about the Third Reich and the Palestine question, which talks about, I know some of the really more pro-Zionist viewers are going to get triggered by this, but it's true. Initially, they do, cynically or not, favor Zionism, and they even allow Zionist Jewish organizations to function in Germany at a time where no other organizations, or very few organizations, could. But they changed their position by the late 1930s before the Holocaust, and they're now against Zionism. So that is the history. The film is basically lying by omission, and we'll keep watching now. Because there's one more lie I need to point out here. Again, it's not true that the amount they received corresponded to their initial deposit, so that's a lie. Though they did receive funds. So. Okay, here is the absurd lie. By 1940, in 1940, the Germans not only so the Germans had turned against fucking is weird. The Germans had turned against the um, uh, Zionist idea by the late 1930s, and by 1940, not only weren't encouraging immigration of Jews to Palestine, but they prohibited all Jewish immigration from their zone of control. So they're claiming that this stopped because of the Second World War. No, it was a specific policy of Germany that Jews will not be allowed to immigrate. So just their total lie. This was deliberate policy. With the war, the exigencies of the war made immigration difficult, of course. But surely, if the Germans hadn't prohibited immigration, there would have been, frankly, probably a lot because they were trying to kill them. So if it was either death or immigration, they would have chosen immigration, right? Or tried to. So they prevent them from immigrating, and if you look at the areas most directly controlled by the Germans, like say Poland, the Jews don't have freedom of movement. Like they can't leave the ghettos of Poland, right? So there's no way for them to immigrate. It's illegal for them to immigrate, and they'll be killed if they leave the ghetto anyway. So it's really silly to claim it's not deliberate German policy and that they still favored this. What this does contradict is not the Holocaust, as this retarded film is trying to claim. It contradicts claims that Hitler had a plan from the beginning. Because why would you in 1933 finalize a plan of Jewish immigration if you want to kill them? So they clearly, extermination was not the policy in 1933. This isn't really an argument with Holocaust scholars and hasn't been for generations. I don't think anyone really takes, even intentionalists who ascribe a lot of almost exclusive role to ideology and the personality of Hitler and top down policy. Even they wouldn't argue at this point that in 1933 this vision is confirmed, because again, it's contradicted by endless documentation and the policy of them letting them go, them even partially looting them, but partially giving them some capacity to survive in Palestine. So it does contradict this kind of crude notion that Hitler had a vision to kill the Jews when he came to power, but it doesn't contradict the Holocaust because the policy is reversed and they prohibit immigration. So, oops, another problem we have with our little film here. Okay, I'm going to move forward a bit. Okay, here we go. I'll use this for briefly. Okay, first of all, the figures are wrong. But when they say Jewish soldiers, they're omitting a core distinction, the Mishlinga versus full-blooded Jews. So the figures are obviously wrong. But like the main problem, the main misleading part of this is that yeah, there were soldiers of Jewish descent in the Wehrmacht, 100% true. But they're not full-blooded Jews, except with very rare fringe exceptions that I don't really know why there were. They're like you're talking like a handful of people that researchers have found, people who may have lied about their ancestry or had gotten exemptions somehow. There's like a handful of people that have been identified, but virtually all these people are of one Jewish parent or maybe one Jewish grandparent only, or less. Like they're not even they're Aryan or Mishlinga under German law. So these figures are inaccurate for Mishlinga. Um, uh, they're less inaccurate when it comes to if you count like everybody who may have some drop of Jewish blood, but even there they're exaggerated. But the main point is that they're falsely implying that people basically that they marked for extermination, people who had two Jewish parents, they're implying that they served in the military when, like, other than fringe cases, which you assume are maybe clerical errors or people lying with their ancestry and serving, a teeny number, right, negligible number, that they're basically all half Jews or quarter Jews or whatever, and in many cases Aryan, because if you're a quarter Jew, you're under the law, you're Aryan. So yeah. Okay, we will move forward and talk. Oh, we got alt hype coming up, so get ready. My old buddy alt hype talking about massacres of ethnic Germans in Poland. So get ready. These are terrible atrocities. So if you're sensitive, pre-war massacres of ethnic Germans in Poland, terrible historical crime. Get ready. So if you need to step out here, I won't hold it against you.
Until 1934, conflicts between Germany and Poland smoldered. Danzig, next to East Prussia, had been completely cut off from the Reich. Warsaw continued to try to wrest total control over the strategically important harbor city. In West Prussia, the situation was similar. East Prussia was now completely cut off from the German Reich. Bolstered by English and French guarantees of war support, Poland has no further incentive to negotiate in good faith with Germany, and in the meantime, in Warsaw, maps are suddenly starting to circulate which contain a new western Polish border extending to just west of Berlin. All across Poland, the so-called pogroms against the minorities begin. Night after night, Polish border officials shot at the fleeing Germans. Shortly before the official outbreak of war, there were already 80,000 ethnic Germans in refugee camps in both Danzig.
So, a couple things. So, first of all, let's talk about the motive for the war. I'm going to have to get this document. I'm going to have to look up my Twitter really quick. So, bear with me, guys. Where the fuck is Chrome? Okay. A lot of Matthews, as you can see. Probably find this on saying Schmut note. History speaks. What the fuck? Where's this? Okay, here we go. Just want to show you guys this document. Okay. Okay. So, as you can see, what the hell is the full one? Oh, maybe I do have this. Okay. So in his big speech, private speech, announcing the policy for the first time, articulating the policy for the first time, calling for the invasion of Poland and confirming this policy, Hitler says specifically, Danzig is not the object of the dispute at all. It is a question of expanding our living space to the east. So that is the articulation Hitler makes in private to his generals, to Goering, to other top brass in the months leading up to the invasion, enunciating the policy. It's about securing food supplies. It's about natural fertility of our people. And he alludes to the use of Poles as slave labor, as you can see here in the third highlighted portion, or the fourth rather. The population of non-German areas will perform no military service that will be available as a source of labor. So he's alluding to we're going to use Poles as manpower. So the policy is grounded in a racialized view of Poles as the natural enemy of Germany, as inferior. Another aspect of this is expanding Lebensraum, the policy outlined in Mein Kampf, that Germany as a great nation should not be confined to such a relatively small and densely populated nation as post-Versailles Germany. So it's expanding Lebensraum, it's taking land from an inferior race, it's ideology baked into Hitlerism that you find as early as Mein Kampf and Zweites Buch, and Danzig is a pretext. Hitler explicitly says that Danzig is not the subject of the dispute at all. So it's all rubbish, all lies from this film. They also just made up entirely, and I challenged Alt-Hype to do this. This actually isn't Alt-Hype. We're going to hear him in a little bit. But this other guy who sounds like a male version of Siri says the same thing. There are massacres and so on. Like pure fabrication, 100% made up. There were no massacres prior to the German invasion. There were retaliatory massacres, most notably in Bromberg in 3rd September 1939. No one denies that. But there were no massacres of ethnic Germans in Poland leading up to the war. Total lie. 100% lie. Stake any reputation I have on that.
Britain and France will declare war on them.
We got alt hype here, guys. Alt hype is on the screen, at least his voice. So here we are. We got some alt hype action. Exciting stuff.
At this point, Poland is actually committing pretty bad atrocities against.
100% made up. I will bet my life on that. That there's no massacres of Germans leading up to the war. Again, after the war, you have this. People will say, "Hey, what about 3rd September?" Unless Hitler had a time machine, that couldn't be the reason for the invasion. Yeah.
Against the German minority in West Prussia, in the German part of Poland at that time. And so given that Poles are committing atrocities against the German minority in Poland, Hitler is now at a very tough situation. Basically, it's like, all right, if I don't declare war on Poland, if I don't go...
This is like Candyland fantasy based on blatant lies. No evidence for massacres of Germans prior to the invasion. You have Bromberg, you have other massacres by Poles after Germany invades as retribution, reprisal. You don't have that before. It's all type is completely making this up. It's as truthful as Rachel Dolezal talking about her black experience, what Altype is saying here.
Go in and help these Germans out, well then the German minority is just going to keep getting slaughtered. And it's not an insignificant amount of Germans in that area who are...
It's 0 that are being slaughtered, by the way. Again, leading up to the war. I'm not saying that images are fake. I'm saying leading up to the war.
Being killed. I mean, it was pretty bad what was going on, what the Poles were doing in that area. And so he was basically saying, well, if we don't go in, then those Germans are just going to keep getting slaughtered. If we go in...
This should tell you how unserious this person is. So he claims to have this extremely high level of epistemic skepticism for the Holocaust, for other atrocities, yet he'll base on nothing other than Nazi propaganda. There's no other evidence for this other than what Nazi propagandists wrote. He will claim there were these horrible massacres of Germans before the war and that they led Hitler to invade. When in Hitler's own words, which I quoted, he tells his top brass, it's not about Danzig, it's about Lebensraum here, guys. Yeah, they may have said publicly different stuff, and they talked about these fake allegations publicly. It was about Lebensraum.
And we're going to find ourselves at war with Poland, France, and Britain, and possibly the Soviet Union.
But in a move of brilliant cunning, he astonished the world in the summer of 1939 by doing a deal with Stalin. With Stalin on his side, Hitler was sure nobody else would interfere when he attacked the Poles.
Okay, so we heard about the Molotov-Ribbentrop. The claim is that the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was motivated on Hitler's part by a desire to, how can I save the ethnic Germans in Poland without being subject to a two-front war? That is the claim the film is making. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. If you want to live in a fantasy world, believe this. There's no evidence for it. You're not an adult, frankly, if you believe this. Sorry, like, as silly as I think generally it is to judge people for meme politics online, like, I am judging you as a human being if you believe that there were systematic massacres of Germans document, because it shows the annexations of Poland by Germany. And you'll notice in Reichsgau Wartheland, or the Warthegau, for example, that not just historically German territories are annexed, but Polish territories that Germany has no claim to in the Warthegau. So this shows that it's not just about Danzig and West Prussia and so on. They're annexing land. They're getting Lebensraum, right? And they get more of it after they invade the Soviet Union. One other picture. This is about Hitler's view of the Poles. I actually posted this to Twitter another day. And also, believe Rosenberg's diary, but I'm not 100% sure. And also Goebbels' diary, because I've read this, not the original, but the copy. Okay, so this is what Rosenberg relays regarding Hitler's view of the Poles. The Poles, Rosenberg recalled Hitler as saying, a thin Germanic layer below that dreadful material. Okay, that's that. A few days later, this is now speaking to Goebbels about the Poles. The Führer's judgment on the Poles is annihilatory, Goebbels recorded. More animals than human beings. The filth of the Poles is unimaginable. Hitler wanted no assimilation. They should be pushed into their reduced state, which is the general government, which was October. There's going to be cleansing work done, a new order of ethnographical relations in Poland. So he makes it plain that he's going to do what he does in fact do, which is ethnically cleansing Poles, not just from like West Prussia and Danzig and whatever traditionally German areas, but from the Warthegau, from Zamość, from areas Germany has no historic claim to. They're ethnically cleansing the subhuman Poles, less than animals, according to Hitler. Pardon me, less than humans, more like animals. And they're replacing them with German settlers. It's a massive ethnic cleansing operation going on. To this effect, I'm going to show a picture of a famous young girl, Czechslava. Gosh, I can't pronounce her now, so I don't speak Polish. Let's call it Czechslava. So this girl, this is your pro-white Nazis. This is their legacy. This girl was from Zamość, an area that had no historical connection to Germany, none. Right? We're not talking about like former West Prussia or anything like this. Sorry, just Czechslava is this innocent little girl who has who's from territory that has no historic connection to Germany. She is taken by Spurgs, subject to cracked racial testing. It's determined that she's not racially good enough. She's a Polish Christian, not Jewish. Christian, not Jewish. Let me repeat. Christian, not Jewish. It's determined she's not racially qualified to be Germanized. So then she's sent to Auschwitz. She's ethnically cleansed from her home to make room for German settlers. She's sent to Auschwitz, and she's apparently murdered. We don't exactly know how she's murdered, but she is murdered there, and it appears to have been by a phenol injection. If not, she was gassed, as many Poles were in 1942, not just Jews. They call off the gassing of Poles in 1942, of Christian Poles, and they continue to kill Jews, but many Poles are killed in 1942 by gassing in Auschwitz. So that is your legacy, Nazis, killing this girl out of Spurgery. So be proud of it. Okay. Let's continue to watch this fine documentary.
You know.
Okay. Look at this. Their aim is to prevent Germany from reclaiming territories lost under Versailles. That is why Britain and France go to war. Now, again, Britain and France, well, I don't know if I've said this yet. So to clarify, Britain and France, Nazis did not want war with Britain and France. So Britain and France initiate war with Nazi Germany. But they don't do it because the Nazis want Danzig and Sudetenland. They do it because the Nazis invaded all of Czechoslovakia. They do it because the Nazis planned and carried out an invasion of Poland with massive ethnic cleansing and annexations of Polish land, traditionally Polish land. So it is not about reclaiming territory under Versailles. Again, you're in Candyland if you believe this. It's rubbish. I mean, read Mein Kampf, for goodness sake, people. You know, read Mein Kampf. Hitler's policy is not revanchism. I love how this film now has like some weird, like quasi anti-colonial message. So they're worried about Germany's economic growth. At stake are the empires and so on. They won't suffer from German advancement. Yeah, they didn't want like Germany to completely dominate continental Europe. There was some self-interest there, of course, but they also wanted to maintain the rules-based order that they hypocritically as empires had basically established in the aftermath of the First World War. Right? They didn't want more conflict and changing of borders and so on. Wanted, I'm not saying their aims were humanitarian, but their aims were very practical and realistic to try to stop this, unhinged conqueror. Right? Going more on the anti-colonial stuff. This is kind of funny. You'll keep going. This is also silly. They're both trying to defeat each other militarily, right? They're not. Germany isn't like, gosh, we have no choice but to go on the offensive. They're trying to defeat France. France is trying to defeat Germany. Again, it's just very silly characterization. Okay, yeah. So pretty exciting stuff coming up here. Um, yeah, I think we got more to do, but I may see if people what's going on with chat. Guys, you gotta it's a lag. Because it looks like it's okay sometimes and it says buffering. I mean, given my boomer tech capacities, I'm kind of just going for it without paying too much attention. But yeah, I have no idea why a hotel would have slow internet. It's ridiculous. But A. Kingston says British colonialism was the most profound good in the history of mankind. I mean, that's obviously gross hyperbole, but the British colonialism did eliminate slavery, traditional slavery as an institution, around the world, which is a pretty redeeming feature of it. Um, I haven't investigated the claims that there was the British policy toward. I have an inclination about how to respond to this, but I know better than to respond to inclinations. About that the British were engaged in some kind of genocidal policy against South Asians, Bengali specifically in World War II, Bengali famine. But I have to look into that in order to responsibly apply to it. Um, okay. Yeah. All right, we're gonna go back to the show.
Alive.
The Soviet Union, like every communist country, was an economic basket case. It could not produce enough to survive. And so every communist socialist state has been dependent upon aid from the capitalist.
Yeah, this is some weird combination of libertarianism and a discussion of the Holodomor famine, where huge numbers of Ukrainians died. The Great Purges, and this horrible thing he did. Stalin was deporting entire ethnic groups, not just Volga Germans, but the Crimean Tatars, the Balkars, the Chechens. During the war, whom he had viewed as collaborating with the Germans. So, I mean, imagine if you were in the Red Army and you came home and your family had been deported to Siberia, and likely some of them had died, and so yeah, terrible atrocities. But you also are a moral imbecile if you think that they're comparable to Hitler's. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna. In the past, I've kind of played nice with that comparison, but you're just if you do that at this point, I'm not going to accept that equation. But they're horrible atrocities.
Direct government aid, but also in terms of opening up the spigots for private capital markets, particularly New York bankers and corporations, to move into Russia in a big way.
In 1933, the Roosevelt administration invited a Soviet representative to Washington to negotiate terms of diplomatic recognition.
I assume this film is saying something like 10 million Ukrainians died in the Holodomor, which is a hugely exaggerated figure. FYI.
Hans Frank is appointed Governor General of Poland, and the country disappears from the headlines of the world press. Jews must wear the Star of David on their arm, not carry it in their pocket. In Warsaw, there is a streetcar exclusively for Jews. A mile-and-a-half square is transformed into a ghetto.
Okay, here we have an insane. So the claim is that there's no comparison, that the treatment of blacks in America and ghettos in the 1930s is just much worse than in the Jewish ghettos, without making light of or mocking the terrible treatment of blacks at the time in the United States, which was quite terrible. And I think people would be surprised, even people who are obviously aware of segregation and so on would be surprised by how much like. Okay, here's Hans Frank from his diary. So Hans Frank is the guy they mentioned. 2 Millionen Juden zum Hungertod verurteilen, sei blah blah blah. Nur am Rande. I keep reading German, but he's saying we sentenced 1.2 million Jews to be mentioned, briefly or trivially, right? Es ist selbstverständlich, blah blah blah. It's self-evident that if the Jews don't starve to death, that the anti-Jewish measures or deportation to the camps will not going to feed them, and if they don't starve to death, will speed up the deportations to the camps. And the film is saying this guy's reign over the ghettos, over the ghettoized Jews of Poland, was way less bad than the treatment of blacks in American inner cities. So yeah, I mean, another greatest story never told. Whopper. I mean, at some level, the lies are so outrageous, you have to wonder if people making this have full command of their mental faculties. It's just so silly. Now, obviously, photos of this wasn't the policy from the very beginning. I mean, the policy was always underfeeding these people and overworking them. But showing pictures from images from 1939 when the ghetto system was first established is not is misleading as to how the treatment was throughout the war in the ghettos. So. Okay, kind of more way back of conquering Russia, right? And oh, for God's sake, where's my okay, yeah, moreover, the Hitler. So that's the vision way back then. A month after the fall of France, it's either 1 month or 2 months. I can't quite remember the top of my head, and I didn't save the picture. So what I mean. But 1 or 2 months after the fall of France, I'll post this in the description. I don't have the document in hand, unfortunately. One or 2 months after the fall of France, Hitler had already planned to invade the Soviet Union. So it's not a preemptive strike in June 1941 if in July or August of 1940, can't remember which one, Hitler's already provided the order for this, right? So under the code name Unternehmen Otto, right? So he wanted Soviet Union for Lebensraum, as he had since the days he wrote Mein Kampf. Well, here's another thing. So the claim that the Soviets were about to attack is discredited from, among other things, the total lack of very, very few units equipped with maps or radios. And it's commonsensical, and it would have been considered commonsensical by the Soviets, that you have to have maps and radios, infrastructure of communication, if you're planning an invasion. So the fact that they lack this infrastructure, in addition to the fact that there's zero evidence that Stalin was ordering an invasion of Germany, zero. In addition to the lack of evidence, there's evidence against this, namely the lack of communicative infrastructure in the Soviet forces. And then in regard to Hitler, he gave the order for the invasion nearly a year before. It's not preemptive to wait that long to invade. If the motive is just a desperately defending from an imminent invasion, the timeline makes no sense. And there was the ideological grounding way back to Mein Kampf, that this inferior race has vast territorial resources in reserve. We need it for our people. It's a Jewish ideology, Bolshevism. It's time to smash him. That's how he thought about it. I mean, it's just silly that they cite Gott mit uns. I mean, that's a Prussian. That comes from the Prussian military days, and Hitler doesn't get rid of it, but it doesn't make Hitler a point of Christian rectitude or anything like this. So, hey, we got a little Holocaust coming up now. Einsatzgruppen specifically.
German capture, he will send survivors to the Gulag. The Wehrmacht's rapid, relentless advance seems unstoppable. Traveling at up to 50 miles a day, panzer divisions are already approaching the heart of Stalin's empire. And in the middle of July, Stalin is forced to consider offering the Germans a negotiated peace. While Stalin contemplates a way out of the war, he's drawing up plans to punish his own troops if they surrender. In a desperate attempt to halt the rout, he issues Order Number 270. All officers and political officials taken prisoner at the front are to be considered traitors. If ever they return to the Soviet Union, they will be arrested and executed.
It's absolutely true that Stalin gave this order. What the film omits, maybe the guy, I don't know who they're citing here. Maybe this guy does say it. This film is obviously a bunch of liars. Maybe. Totally true that this order was given. In practice, though, it isn't enforced. At the end of the war, the repatriated POWs, some of them go to Gulag. A lot of them are just released. Some of them are reconscripted into the military. The vast majority of them are not killed and don't die either. So, yeah. But it is true that the order was given for this. So that can't be denied and shouldn't be. Stalin was extremely brutal.
But the barbarity of Order 270 does not stop there. The wives of captured troops also face imprisonment in the Gulag.
We got a little Holocaust now. Okay. Blatant lie here. It is true, absolutely, that this is like dog whistling about like Ukrainians and Baltic civilians killing Jews, Christians killing Jews, right? Upon the German invasion. That is true. However, the Germans had a specific policy of whipping up pogroms. They wanted to whip these people up into pogroms, have them kill Jews, and this is all firmly documented in testimonial evidence and also in documentary evidence, so that they could have Jews be killed as potential security threats and that they wouldn't be seen as responsible. These are documents that I'll be posting to in the description. Let me make a note of these two things. The first thing I need to post is I'm gonna make a note of this really quick, guys, so I don't forget. A couple of these things I didn't get. Okay, so whipping up pogroms. I need to post that. And then the first one I talked about, what the fuck was that? What did I talk about? Oh, the order for not for Barbarossa quite, but for invading the Soviet Union in the summer of 1940. Alternate. All right, cool. Yeah. Okay, just made a note of that in text. Let's keep watching. Okay, so basically, characterization is that the Einsatzgruppen is developed to fight partisans, and that local civilians go too far and kill Jews. That's the film's claim. Let's look at the actual documentary evidence. Okay, here's the infamous report of Karl Jaeger. And Jaeger is listing the number of Jews killed in enumerated regions of the Balkans by the Nazis themselves. So we're not talking about specifically local collaborators and so on. So he lists Jews shot. You can see the enumerated dates in the late 1940s. And I believe it's in the Baltic states and also parts of Belarus. But he lists men, women, and children. So like you can see on the 20th of the 20th of September 1941, they shoot 99 Jewish kids, 128 Jewish men, 176 Jewish women. 2 days later, they shoot 200 Jewish kids. They use the word Kinder. They're not using Jugendlichen or like teenager. They're talking about children. This is the connotation in German. Kinder is children. So they're not shooting partisans. They're systematically killing kids as well as men and women. And they end up killing the vast majority of Jews in their remit. In the case of Jaeger, as you can see, from in the enumerated dates in late 1941. He shoots 137,000 Jews, men, women, and children, civilians, the vast majority they can get their hands on. The Einsatzgruppen and other units, for that matter, other German units like the police and so on in the occupied Soviet Union. So, yeah, the film is just lying by saying they're just shooting partisans. Mike Enoch said that in the debate, that this is all commissars or partisans. He goes back and forth, but I mean, why are they shooting kids and reporting this that every day? Yeah, 511 kids shot, 821 shot, let's say 436 shot. It's clearly a systematic effort. It's being sent to Berlin. They're not ashamed of it. It's bureaucratically confirmed. There's no one being fired for this or disciplined. You're a moron if you look at this and you think the policy is just shoot partisans when kids are being shot systematically, Jewish children. So check on chat really quick. All right, guys, how the fuck no one is talking to me about this. How is the connection? I'm glad you're having a conversation, but how is the connection? Is it unbearable? Like, is it okay? Tell me that. All right. Okay. We'll keep going. Oh, another document I should cite. Where is this one? This little note. Okay, this is talking about the situation in the Soviet Jews. It's a note from Himmler in December of 41, Hitler, and he announces they basically describe the policy here, Judenfrage als Partisanen auszurotten. So they're going to exterminate as partisans the Jews in the Soviet Union. We're not talking about all Jews in Europe at this point. At least that's not how I interpret it. There's some people who interpret it as that. I think the evidence is weak for that, but they're not talking about just partisans. They're actually talking about exterminating Jews as partisans. This was another contention I had with our good friend Enoch. If you're saying I'm going to treat you like or as a piece of shit, Mike Enoch, you're not saying you're literally a piece of shit. If they're saying here we're going to treat Jews as partisans and kill them like partisans as if they're partisans, obviously that's describing killing Jews. It's not saying all Jews are partisans. It's saying we're going to treat them like they are. Right? Keyword there is as. Yep. And by the way, here is a document, which I'm not going to go through now because I already skipped this, but here is a document that talks about, where Heydrich talks about on 29 June 1941, the need to incite pogroms against Jews. So it isn't as great a story never told says just about, local people taking the law into their own hands or murder of Jews into their own hands. This is encouraged by the Germans. As a matter of policy. So, yeah. Okay. Okay, this is again very selective. So the film is highlighting Stalin's brutality, which is completely legitimate to do. They're not noting it's a means of inspiring Soviet defense of Stalingrad, but they're not noting. They never note the German plans for the city. So they never note the corresponding and much worse German brutality. So let's take a look at that. This is from David Irving's Hitler's War of all books. So to quote Irving in the highlighted portion, 1942, Hitler announced that the male populations of Stalingrad and Leningrad are being exterminated, and he also orders the cities razed, and the women and children are going to be deported in some brutal way. So, Hitler's planning to raze the cities, kill all the men, and the women and kids are going to be deported in some brutal fashion. So that's totally omitted. And of course, the fact that Hitler is responsible for the war and the invasion is omitted. Yeah, and then generally speaking, and this is from an academic called Contemporary European History. This is a quotation um, from the desk of Economic Staff East under the directive of Hans-Joachim Rieck. Um, the this is one of many documents. Goering says this as well. Many tens of millions of people will become superfluous and die the occupied Soviet Union, in other words, or must immigrate to Siberia. So there's a plan, an intention of killing tens of millions of Germans, of occupied Soviet citizens through starvation, and to continue this, attempts to rescue the population from death through starvation by obtaining surpluses from the Black Earth Zone can only be at the expense of the provisioning of Europe. So we can't help them because that'll be at the expense of Europe. One thing that's interesting here is the racial character of the policy. So they're not just taking the food away from the Soviets and sending them to Germans. They're also taking it away and sending it to people of Western Europe that they're occupying, right? Like French and Dutch and so on. So it's clearly a racial policy that devised on the grounds of Slavic inferiority. And again, Nazis, you're excusing genocide against populations you claim to care about, white European Slavic populations. So, okay, we'll move up a little bit.
But though they fight on, the bullets are running out, and the Red Army is still coming at them. Finally, after 5 long months, a battle that began almost by accident is over.
It's just total fabrication. It isn't that people are expressing seditious views systematically, but they're not all talking about their ideology in these final letters. Total fabrication. It isn't that people are expressing Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this. Some of the stuff they're saying is accurate. It's a extremely high death rate among the people captured by the Soviets, Stalingrad. That's certainly true. But what's dishonest about this presentation is all the lies by omission. So there's no discussion. There's a discussion, this romanticized discussion about the heroism of the invaders of Stalingrad, who wanted to raise the city, by the way, and kill all the men and brutalize the women and children. That's not mentioned, of course. But the blunders by Hitler in this battle aren't mentioned. So Paulus, who becomes field marshal and heads the Sixth Army, Stalingrad, wanted to attempt a breakout. And Hitler said, no, you cannot give an inch. And that order facilitates the encirclement of the Sixth Army and their retreat. But here he doesn't. And it's a massive fiasco. An entire army is annihilated. This is the turning point in the war. This in Kursk. So to not mention Hitler's huge blunder in not allowing for an attempt to break out and also a strategic retreat earlier is totally irresponsible. And moreover, of course, this is all cliche, but it's true. Hitler and the general staff, not just Hitler, but all of these guys, initially, this is moving back a bit, they didn't provision on the invasion of the Soviet Union, they didn't provision winter clothes for these people, right? That's another example of a massive military and logistical error that the Wehrmacht makes that this film doesn't mention. I mean, I feel like I'm almost holding this film to too high of a standard because it's like some sixth grader Nazi, saying these things. But nevertheless, if you're for the Ardennes in May 1940, that was a huge triumph. But you have to mention Hitler's role in the Stalingrad fiasco. It's just silly not to, and the film doesn't. It just talks about how heroic everybody was. So yeah. Okay. We got a little Holocaust, Auschwitz stuff coming up. You guys don't want to miss it. Sit tight. Okay. This is a funny part coming up. Okay, we should scroll back a little bit. All right. So notice we're talking about the typhus outbreak in Auschwitz, which should occur in 1942. Okay, so the insinuation here, they haven't gotten to their main Holocaust-denial part yet, but the insinuation here is that the huge death rate in Auschwitz in 1942 was attributable to typhus. The problem with this argument, and the huge death rate in Auschwitz more generally, the problem with this argument is that the death rate in Auschwitz is essentially beaten. Sorry, the typhus epidemic in Auschwitz is essentially beaten in 1943, and the death rate of Jews there, the number of Jews who perished there, radically increases in 43 and 44. So it doesn't fit the typhus model; it fits the extermination model. So 42, the typhus epidemic is rampant, and if you ever see the argument that the Germans are so logistically precise, how could they have designed these death camps in a haphazard way? I mean, even on if you're dumb and assume Auschwitz wasn't a death camp, Auschwitz was so built on swampland. It was such an infrastructural bungle that this facilitated epidemics, terrible epidemics in 1942, and led to a lot of death, not among just inmates, but among Germans. So the SS was a bungling and ideological organization, not by no means the pinnacle of German ingenuity or efficiency. In Auschwitz, Commandant Rudolf Höss was a fucking convicted murderer. I mean, these were kind of horse people. Convicted murder by the Germans, not by the Allies, right? So, all right, you'll want to listen to this part next. Okay, I'm going to first ask you, who is this person implying to be? And then I'm going to answer who this person is. But we're going to listen first to their account. Who is this person implying to be? Implying that they were? Are they implying they were a Jew? Who are they implying they were? And then we're going to answer that.
Germany at that time already was besieged by 51 countries. They were struggling for their lives, and they took us in. We were all put into what looked like a great big bathroom. And what happened eventually is that they rained soap and water on us, and the reason for that was that we had to be deloused. We were so full of lice. So when I hear about the shower heads and the Holocaust and all of that, I know exactly what it was. That was soap and water raining down on us to delouse us, to wash us down like dogs. The same for the cutting of hair. I mean, we were all shorn bald in order to stop the lice. Everybody had lice in the war. I mean, this was just common knowledge. We considered ourselves lucky if we could ride those cattle cars. And yes, they were crammed full of people, and yes, it was very difficult, you know, to travel like that. Often you could not sit, you had to stand because they were crammed full. This is how it was in those years. People were hanging on those cattle cars. When you see those pictures, that could have been us. We were like that. The same when you see the bunk beds. My goodness, we were lucky if we had bunk beds where we could sleep at night. It meant we did not have to sleep outside in the snow.
Okay, so this is now this is, I guess, a matter of opinion. To me, it seems to me clearly that the implication is this person is a Jew who is trying to who was sent to camps, was deloused by by showering, and because she's disputing, she went in cattle cars. She says all this stuff. It seems to me that the implication, how a normie would see this, maybe I'm wrong, but the normie would interpret this as being a Jew. Now, here's the funny part. This is actually Ernst Zündel's wife. And she was an ethnic German in Ukraine, and they brought her to Germany because she's ethnic kin, and that's their ideology. And she's trying to use her account to refute the Holocaust. And the film, which did identify her earlier, she's credited earlier and identified earlier, to be fair, but they don't identify her here. And my interpretation, it's up to you guys how you interpret it. My interpretation is that clearly the film is implying that this is a Holocaust survivor, and the Germans treated me so well. Cattle car was not so bad. The conditions in the camp she was briefly held before being sent to Germany weren't so bad. That is my interpretation of this. And your mileage may vary, but if that is indeed how it is interpreted, it's pretty funny that the wife of like one of the most famous Holocaust deniers is trying to pretend she's a Holocaust survivor to debunk the story. So, okay, we're gonna go to the Warsaw Uprising. Okay, so Joe seems to think that Joe seemed to interpret this as being an argument. Joe seemed to clearly interpret this as and look at chat as as a Jew. So that's one piece of evidence that the film is implying she's a Jewish survivor. No, she was deloused and treated well because she was an ethnic German. She was not a Jew. So she was an ethnic German in Ukraine that they wanted to bring out of a war zone and take to Germany because she's their ethnic kin. That's why she was treated well. And she's trying to use her experience to deny the Holocaust, and it's completely absurd.
The first overt signal that Stalin comes not as liberator but as conqueror is seen in late July, as General Rokossovsky takes the eastern Polish city of Lublin. Within hours of the red flag's appearance over the city, Stalin has installed a puppet communist government, the Lublin Committee. Loud denunciations by nationalist Poles in London bring little response from the Allied corridors of power, and the London Polish government is powerless to prevent this theft of its constituency. But its cries will not long go unheeded. Uncle Joe Stalin is about to drop his mask and show his true face to the world. On the 29th of July, Soviet radio issues a general plea to the Polish resistance movement, the Home Army. The carefully worded broadcast calls for active resistance to the occupying forces and gives the impression, without ever directly saying so, that the Red Army is about to storm the city. But the Red Army does not move from its positions just east of the city, and Stalin, oblivious to mounting pressure from Western leaders, grimly rejects Churchill's request for the use of Soviet airfields for RAF planes dropping supplies. Without help, the Poles are doomed.
Okay, so the film, and they also talk about, going into more detail about sexual violence against Germans, absolutely real. The film here is talking about Stalin not caring for these people. So let's look at what the film omits. Regarding the sexual violence, what they omit is the German sexual violence, the systematic sex trafficking of 15-year-old girls, for example, girls as young as 15, on the Eastern Front. The fact that in the Eastern Front, Germans weren't even punished for rape; they were only punished for racial shame, Rassenschade. Um, so that's omitted. So when they highlight Stalinist atrocities, this film, they're usually not lying. They're either exaggerating or they're telling the truth, but they just omit the fact that the Nazis had a similar record or worse. So it's that the case with regard to sexual violence. Let's now talk about what they omit. What they omit. I actually posted this to Twitter earlier today from David Irving's book. Let's see what they omit regarding the Warsaw Uprising. What happened? How did the Germans react when the Poles rebelled? Okay, this is from Irving's Hitler's War. Okay, so this is in response to in the midst of the Warsaw Uprising. Himmler came to Hitler. Mein Führer, he orated, historically what the Poles are doing is a blessing. We'll survive the next 5 or 6 weeks, but by then Warsaw, the capital, the brains, the nerve center will be, will be wiped out. And Irving notes the Reichsführer ordered the destruction of the city. It was to be blown up block by block. So they order the razing of the city, of a great, noble, historical European capital. And in the course of this, which the film, of course, omits, they don't mention any of this, they massacre huge numbers of Poles in reprisals, and end up killing more Poles, in the Warsaw Uprising, in the razing of Warsaw, than Japanese died combined in the atomic bombings of Republic as a Soviet bloc state plus Katyn. So you're just not able to handle moral priorities if you think the Soviets were as bad as the Nazis. In just the 1944 response to the Warsaw Uprising, and the razing of Warsaw by the Nazis, they kill more people than the Soviets killed in generations of dominance of Poland. So again, if you can't handle moral priorities, it's not really my problem. But if you want to be intellectually serious about this, it's pretty clear that the greater evil were the Germans, not the Soviets. Yeah. Okay. I think we'll skip some of the other military history stuff. It's like dumb and romanticized. They characterize as heroic struggles completely pointless deployments of German troops, like the Battle of the Bulge and so on, like pointless death that the Nazis ordering people to die in battle. I wouldn't say out of cowardice on Hitler's part, but out of a bizarre ideological commitment to, we're not going to repeat capitulation of 1918. We'll never repeat that. We'll keep fighting, even if the odds are pathetic. I think I'll skip that and we'll go to Holocaust-denial stuff. Really quick, though, I'm going to look at the chat, I think, see what you guys are talking about. Okay, Mark's audio is breaking up. Yeah, I'm disappointed by the connection. It's not good. I'm in a hotel right now. I'm in the archives. I really thought this would be a stronger connection, but nope, it isn't. It seems to have been mostly watchable, but yeah. Okay, looks like you guys are having an interesting chat. There's some deniers in here. There's lawyer, who's a buddy of mine. See you, lawyer. But yeah, I got some good Nazi trolls, which I like too. Klein asks, does Europa: The Last Battle have consistent voiceovers? Gosh, I don't know. I haven't watched that one yet. We'll have to take a look at it. Yeah. Valor Morgolis says, watch Europa: The Last Battle. Maybe I will. I mean, this one has been really fun. We'll see. I actually hear Europa is crazier than this one, which is pretty hard to top. I mean, this one tried to present Ingrid Zündel as a Holocaust survivor. they tried to they tried to claim through all hype that the Germans invaded Poland because the Poles were massacring the Germans. They just have a fantasy Candyland version of the war. And if you guys if you guys have watched this and you want to believe that, I think at this point you need to talk to a psychiatrist. Really, I mean, because there's no evidence for the narrative they have, like zero. It isn't like a matter of weak evidence. There is no evidence that the Germans were being massacred before the invasion of Poland. There's no evidence that they were being massacred before the invasion of Czechoslovakia. Operation Barbarossa was ordered, well, not ordered in the form of Barbarossa, because that's more specific, tactical, but the invasion of the Soviet Union was ordered 1 or 2 months after the fall of France. I can't remember which, but I definitely know it was either 1 or 2. You guys are in a fantasy world if you think the war was about revanchism or Versailles. Hitler wanted his Lebensraum. He wanted a great European empire. And that's part of the story of Hitler, this horrible person who was a human being and, whose legacy is genocide and aggressive war. I mean, but it can be interesting, right? You don't have to look at Hitler as a cartoon, but you have to look at what he did too. Yeah, I know. Revolution. Look, again, you can believe this stuff if you want. Hitler had to present a face to the world, to the Western world, because by 1939, ironically, because Britain and France are empires, right? By 1939, it was not. You could not just engage in aggressive war for territorial expansion the way you could in the 19th century, based on the right of conquest, right? That wasn't considered legitimate. So Hitler had to have breakdown. He was actually very frustrated when the concessions were so big, like basically giving him all of Sudetenland, because that meant he really couldn't optically turn down the offer. So he was actually quite upset afterwards. And then 3 weeks after the Munich Agreement, he plans the invasion of Czechoslovakia wholesale. So there's just, you guys don't have responses to this, and you want to live in a fantasy world where Hitler had by some liberal non-aggression axiom policy in foreign relations, or at least was just a revanchist, right? So yeah. Joe says Jordan is making stuff up like affirmers always do. Okay. Don't know either Joe or Jordan. All right, let's go back to the film. We're going to talk about Holocaust-denial now. And then, guys, get questions ready because your comments are fun to read, but it's, I can't just jump into a discussion of comments. What I can do is respond to specific questions. So, yeah. I'm going to go back to the film, but get your questions ready, and I'll answer them at the end. Okay. Okay, so it should be 4:32. We're going to the Holocaust now, so get ready. I may have some good arguments here that I may struggle with, right? So /S, by the way, because you guys are really dumb. I'm not saying every single one of you. See, some of you are just crazy or biased or whatever, but some of you are really dumb. So I have to clarify, sarcasm in situations where it should be blindingly obvious. No, I am being sarcastic. Great story never told does not have good arguments against the Holocaust, but let's do it. Okay, let's go back a bit. Okay, so the implication here, clearly stated, let's go back up here, is the Bolsheviks have claimed they've across Eastern Europe. It isn't explicitly stated, but it's clearly implied that the story of gas chambers comes from the Soviets, and who can trust them? I mean, they did the Great Purge, like fake political enemies through sham show trials, as we all know. So how could you trust them? Well, there are a lot of problems with this argument. First of all, the claim of extermination doesn't emerge with the Soviets, but emerges with the Polish government in exile, the Polish resistance. That's the first problem. The second problem is the Allies, Western Allies, found homicidal gas chambers. I repeat, guys, Western Allies found homicidal gas chambers. Now you're spurging out right now. I can see the meme faces. They found them. Now, the main extermination camps that killed the vast majority by gassing were in Poland, and therefore, for obvious logistical reasons, if you know anything about the war and the fronts, the Soviets liberated them. But the Allies liberated Schuyler, which had extermination through gas chambers. They liberated Mauthausen in Austria, Linz, which had extermination through gas chambers. The Americans did, and they liberated Hartheim Castle, which had exterminations through gas chambers, not just of euthanasia victims. All bodies of gas victims, pictured them at, particularly in the case of Natzweiler, they took pictures of individuals who were stored at the Strasbourg Anatomical Institute, the Americans did, and who were gassed Jews. So the Allies found camps with homicidal, the Reinhardt camps, Krummhof, but the Allies independently investigated these claims of gassing. So 2 cases at the Bergen-Belsen trial. The British, by themselves, the British do a trial by themselves, right? They do a trial by themselves, and they conclude by interviewing. And I should mention, it may seem like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm a little tired, to be honest. Worked in the archives all day, but I'm going to keep going. We're going to kick ass here and finish this off. At the Belsen trial, the British had captured many personnel who had previously worked at Auschwitz, like Kramer, who was the commandant of Belsen, had previously been the commandant of Auschwitz, and had brought many of his former colleagues to Belsen with him. So, it may be called the Belsen trial, but they also investigated allegations of gassing at Auschwitz, and the British concluded that Auschwitz was an extermination camp with gas chambers. So it isn't just something the Soviets investigated or that the Allies investigated with the Soviets. There were independent investigations by the Allies. Similarly, the United States, by itself, did the I.G. Farben trial, where they investigated I.G. Farben, which, among other things, had exploited slave laborers at the Auschwitz-Monowitz camp and had provided Zyklon B to Auschwitz. In the course of this, they investigated the allegations of gassing at Auschwitz and found they were true. And before you say, oh, they're just all conspiracy, shill trial, well, take the Belsen trial. The British were initially alleging gassing at Bergen-Belsen, and by the end, they're like, no, it didn't happen. This is not true. So some hoax, right? I mean, some hoax. If you're admitting, yeah, we made a false allegation, you're not convicting people of it. Trial. What a hoax. I mean, gosh. Just like the Stalinist show trials, right? Right, Wignat boys? Yeah, so I just don't know how you guys keep this stuff up, but you do. Oh, by the way, shrunken heads were real. We know this because the Germans investigated it themselves. They concluded that shrunken heads were being manufactured, and they ordered it to be stopped at Buchenwald. So it happened. It was against German orders. The Germans condemned it. It was like the Buchenwald pathology department that made them. So I don't know why the shrunken heads are thrown in with lampshades and soap, which were not true stories. Or lampshades, some people think were true. I don't. But they're thrown in with soap, which was definitely not true. Jewish soap is definitely fake. But the shrunken heads are real, so yeah. Okay, Dachau massacres are real, so I don't really need to go through that because it happened. You can look into this if you want to look into U.S. soldiers killing assessment at Dachau and pretend you're outraged by that. Yeah. But this isn't fake. Okay, so we don't really need to talk about it because it's not. I'm not accusing them of making it up. Yeah, this is also humorous. So why would they admit that? First of all, the gas chamber Dachau was absolutely real and was intended for homicidal purposes. It wasn't used. It was not used, and because I'm not contesting, I don't need to go into all the reasons why. But we know with beyond a reasonable doubt, it was not used. So I don't understand why, though, that the fact that the Americans are admitting that is supportive of a hoax. Why are they admitting that no one was gassed at Dachau? Now, um, there were Dachau inmates who were gassed. They were sent, as I said, thousands were sent to Hartheim Castle to be gassed, right? So it's not that their Dachau inmates were not gassed, but they weren't gassed at Dachau, right? And but yeah, I mean, maybe they thought the Hartheim gas chamber was better. I don't know why they didn't do it. It's one of these mysteries of history. If you think that they didn't use it and we don't know why, they preferred to send them to Hartheim and gas them there, proves the Holocaust isn't true. Like, again, there are antipsychotics for that. That's not really evidence. So it actually is evidence that the Americans were not lying because they admitted, yeah, the evidence shows, contrary to what we initially thought, this building was actually never used to kill people. So. There's one thing that's not quite a lie, but is, I think, impliedly a lie. That you could debate this, whether this is dishonest or not. There's one thing that's an outright lie. The first thing that's not outright lie is that no investigation. So again, the Americans and the British independently investigated allegations of gassing at Auschwitz in the Belsen trial because they had the British in the Belsen trial, and because they had Kramer and his guys. They needed to investigate what Kramer had been up to in Auschwitz, not just in Belsen. And also the Americans in the IG Farben trial. So they investigated the claims of gassing at Auschwitz, just fake lie nonsense. The second thing, which I'm not sure, it's just phrased a little weird. It seems dishonest, but maybe I'm being unfair. Is it's not claimed anywhere other than the Soviets liberated that millions were in chambers. Well, it's true. Like, it isn't claimed at Mauthausen, Fartheim, Nutzweiler, or Ravensbrück that millions were killed in gas chambers, even though people were killed there at a large scale. So I guess I don't know. It seems to be dishonestly phrased, but I'll let that go. But what the lie is that only the Soviets, or there was no proper investigation of the allegations of gassing in the East. Just total lie. Or it was only done by the communists. Okay, in terms of people made into soap, it definitely happened, and it definitely wasn't Jews. It was done at the Danzig Anatomical Institute. It was not done to Jewish concentration camp inmates. There's no evidence of this. It was done to non-Jews. Some very limited scale. It was not done in the camps. This was a rumor. It was false. Lipstadt is a bit sloppy. She actually says nobody was made into soap. That's not true. She's right that Jews were not made into soap. Lipstadt also said, like, she massively inflated the death toll. I didn't know we were going to show the piece. Yeah. But for that matter, anyone, absolutely false, sloppy research. True that they didn't use Jews to make soap. This was a rumor in the camps. It was not true.
I rather wish the Führer had stood by his followers.
They're not playing like a documentary. I don't know, we'll play this because it's silly. We'll just play it. Why the hell not? It's not relevant. It's from a DBC docudrama on Nuremberg. We'll play it.
And taken the responsibility for his command. Think of his position.
By the way, that is Goering. I mean, Goering speaking right now. And it's true that Goering was kind of the alpha male at Nuremberg. A lot of these guys were kind of quivering in fear. While Goering was the Führer, he was expressing contempt for Jackson. He was strutting, and maybe is reflective of a stronger personality on his part than most of the Nazis. I mean, my view of these guys is like, you have non-ideological people and like S, who believes like in voodoo, and Himmler, who believes that the Tibetans are the ancient Aryans. I mean, it's kind of a clown show with two strong personalities at the top, Goering and Hitler. I mean, this is kind of this may be a cheap analogy, but and again, I'm not comparing the evil or anything like this or the strength of the personality, but like I do see some analogy with Nick Fuentes and his people because Nick is a lawyer hates when I say this, but Nick is a talented and charismatic figure. His followers, Groypers, are like I don't know, they're just beneath. You can't talk to them. They're too unintelligent. They're too weak. They're too dishonest. I think it's similar with Hitler. You have this incredibly compelling personality, wicked personality, great personality, negative greatness to be sure, but great. And you have Goering as well. But then beneath them, you have just the clown show. Anyway, we'll let Goering speak for himself here.
Oh, sure. His position as chief war criminal, right?
He was our sovereign. It would be intolerable for me to have him standing before a foreign court. You men knew the Führer. He would be the first one to stand up and say, I gave the orders and I shall take full responsibility. And I would rather die 10 deaths than have the sovereign subjected to such humiliation.
Yeah, so there's a lot of it's a cool scene, but it's also dramatization. There's a lot of stuff like this in Greatest Story Never Told that just is like this is from BBC. This isn't from them, right? But Goering was he did cast a strong figure at Nuremberg, although he started to crumble, and he got the best even of Robert Jackson, according to most of the press. By the way, odd show trial where the cross-examined can get the better of the prosecutor. Interesting show trial there, but he does start to wilt when the British attorney Maxwell Fyfe starts to present the evidence and interrogate Goering about the evidence for the mass murders in his final statement to the court. But he does maintain, and this is something actually David Irving gets from Goering. He maintains the Führer didn't know it was the SS who did this and so on. I think he's obviously lying. He says, "I believe the Führer didn't know." I know, but he's obviously lying about his knowledge and Hitler's knowledge to try to preserve some dignity for the Nazis in history. But the figure he casts is very different at Nuremberg than most of these guys who are just kind of shriveling up and feeling sorry for themselves and crying and pretending to convert to Christianity and really pathetic shit. It actually creates the interesting counter-factual, what if Hitler was at Nuremberg? Because Hitler was a strong personality like Goering. He wasn't a coward like these other people, for the most part, were. And, but Hitler, by the end of his life, though, Hitler was suffering from Parkinson's disease. He was a drug addict and so on. So he wasn't the great speaker, the legendary orator of before, or the bold soldier of the First World War. I think he would have come across quite badly because of the Old Testament. He basically says interpretation of his final testament. So, yeah, let's keep watching. I don't think war reparations we're that interested in. I mean, okay, paid a lot of reparations. This is actually an interesting point. I mean, one of the Nazi memes is, how are there more Holocaust? The reason is a question of definition. Holocaust survivors have been defined by different organizations as either Jews who survived a camp or a mass shooting, which is obviously a much smaller category. Or you can have it wider as Jews who were in Nazi-occupied Europe. Or you can have it wider still as Jews who were in Nazi-occupied Europe or French and Nazi-occupied North Africa. The last category of which was not systematically killed even. But some Jewish organizations have defined survivors, including, for example, Tunisian Jews, because they were under Nazi occupation, even though they were not systematically killed. And the vast majority survived. So this question of definition, which the film isn't actually talking about this, but I'm bringing it up, the question of definition and the changing definition of what is a Holocaust survivor exactly, and also does it have to be someone who was in Germany during the Holocaust, or could you have been someone who migrated to the United States in 1934? Because that is a survivor. These different definitions are the reason for the different estimates of the number, and those different estimates, of course, give meme power to the Nazis. Although it's like all their memes, it relies on ignorance rather than actual insight. Okay, we're not going to talk about. Okay, here we go. All right, all right, this bit. They're just lying outright. There are photographs of Americans took photographs of the Nazi victims who were gassed, right? So there also is one video. I'm gonna post this, and it's I don't believe it's of Jews, but there's one video of that which depicts a gassing of. It's like an extension of the euthanasia thing, gassing of incurably ill people. So there is a video footage of gassing, and I'm not sure it's publicly available, but certainly the reports of it are. Um, and there are autopsy reports of victims of gas fans. So every statement here is false. There are photographs, there's video footage, and there are autopsies of gas fan victims from Minsk, for example. So yeah, everything false here.
We also had an orchestra where some of the musicians stood together, and one musician was so good.
Okay, this next bit is from Eric Hunt, who admits, I haven't looked into all of these testimonies, but Eric Hunt put these testimonies together where it's Jews. I don't know if the headings are wrong, the time is wrong, but Eric Hunt admits he was lying when he put this together. Ex-denier Hunt. So maybe they weren't in Auschwitz, maybe they were in Auschwitz before extermination happened, maybe they aren't Jewish. I don't know. I don't know the meaning of this. What I do know is that the person who put this together and put together the subtitles said he was lying and is no longer a Holocaust denier. So it has no credibility if the person who designed it and used these subtitles said he's lying. Look back and see where he found this in the Spielberg archives, but the guy who made this. Okay, here are their Hunt things. Theresienstadt is easy. I mean, this was used as propaganda to allow for a Red Cross visit and so on. So, okay, now we can talk about this amenities and so on. Okay, so I'll talk about a few of these. Let's see, let's get all of them on the screen. Okay, let's talk about a few of these. Right, letters. Let's talk about letters and postcards first. So, one big point here, one meta point here. Auschwitz was a massive camp, really 3 concentration camps, with huge numbers, many, many, many tens of thousands of inmates of all different nationalities. So not just Jews. So let's start with letters. There were letters written by Jewish inmates at Birkenau to their families. God, that seems like really weird. Letters? People in an extermination camp? Wow, what the fuck is going on there? Well, the problem is they're obviously sham letters since they say the same thing. So the letters say the same thing. They use the same words, same language. So like, you're not going to have dozens, hundreds, thousands of people write all the same letter that like the work is hard, but the treatment is just using the exact same phraseology. Clearly, the letters were coerced. That you can infer that by just it's statistically improbable given the diversity of human language that people would all write the same shit, including the same phrases, with like teeny little variants, the same description, the same language, etc. So the letters, which would be interesting if they were actually like individual letters, clearly coerced and based on a script intended to. And actually, the Jewish Council in Amsterdam, I can't remember where it was actually. It's either in the Netherlands or Belgium. A Jewish Council figures this out. They figure out the letters are shams, and they're talking about what does this mean. They have an internal dialogue about this. So, football team is most of this stuff you see Jews. So it's Auschwitz was a really big facility. It's not in Birkenau. It's not Jews. At Monowitz, that working Jews could go to, but these are only for working Jews. There's no Jewish women or kids being treated there. They're killed at arrival. Now, it is true that in 1933 and 34 and 44, the Germans, there's documents about this, they want to get more time out of their slave laborers because they actually are complaints. They're dying so quickly. We need them to work for the war. So, for example, if you were a Jewish young man who cuts his finger badly, you could go to the hospital, so-called, and get stitches. Right? Primo Levi talks about this, and this is a man. So this is no secret, and it's only for slave laborers. It's not for treating like Jews who are young or old. Or 80% of Jews are just killed at arrival. So this has nothing to do with them, and calling it a hospital is rather humorous too. But sure, you could, again, if I'm a 23-year-old healthy Jew who arrives from Hungary where they're not starved right before arrival, and I cut my finger really badly at Auschwitz, they won't send me to the gas chamber. And I can't work. They'll send me most likely to the hospital, quote unquote, and they'll get stitches. So if you think that disproves the Holocaust, great, but you have no evidence that any Jew who's young or old, can't work, is there. It's only able-bodied Jews. It's for the war effort. It's all consistent with the policy as understood by historians of preserving the small minority who can do essential work labor for a time and killing the non-able-bodied. So that's that. And this other shit is all just not even anything to do with Jews, right? So, or capos, perhaps, but not like Jewish inmates as such. So it's just, they're just talking about things that have nothing to do with Jews. The only one that needed that qualification was the hospital, so-called. And I'll just reiterate with regard to the hospital. Like, we know that from Jewish witnesses. So Primo Levi, the guy we learned about this from, right? So you say, oh, the Jews are lying. Well, Primo Levi is the one who told us about the so-called hospital, how you have to get better. If you're there, you'll be killed. You have to go, recover, right? If you have the flu or whatever, you have to get better and get back to work or you'll be killed, So he said, like, people wanted to go there and get a little rest, but they knew if they stayed too long, they're going to be murdered. So it's a bizarre thing, but it makes sense if you look at the Nazi policy, which, as understood by all historians, which is killing non-able-bodied Jews and preserving able-bodied Jews for a time so they can work for the war. Yeah. But generally, I mean, these memes just rely on the hospital is the one that you have to elaborate on, but these memes just rely on ignorance of the fact that Auschwitz was 3 camps. There was prisoners of all nationalities, and there were amenities for non-Jewish prisoners that Jews didn't have access to. So yeah. Swimming pool, nothing to do with Jews in Auschwitz 1. No extermination of Jews there by 1944 when it's built. Just irrelevant nonsense. I will just watch this for fun for like 30 seconds. I mean, I don't want to make light of the suffering and the gulags, of course, but like the silliness of this presentation is pretty apparent, I think. Okay, we're gonna now move forward a little bit and talk about David Cole's documentary.
All there is are the eye.
Sorry, let's get him from the beginning.
I know from years of my own research and the research of others that proofs of the Holocaust are few. Literally, all there is are the eyewitness testimonies and post-war confessions. There's no picture, plan, or wartime document dealing with homicidal gas chambers or a plan to exterminate the Jews.
Okay, so, I mean, I don't, I like David, I talked to David, but this is outrageously false. Let's take gas chambers for a second. You, of course, have the famous document referring to Leichenkeller 1, Korpskeller 1, which now came as a morgue of Krima 1 as a Vergassungskeller. There's a second document. There's this from the Auschwitz chief instruction man, Bischoff, in January 43. There's another document referring to it as gas chamber. There's other documents talking about preheating systems needing to be installed there. Preheating for what, I wonder? Geez. There's another document talking about need for a gas-tight door and the installation of it. There's another document talking about the need for shower heads. We see that these dummy shower heads, there's no piping, so we know they're fake shower heads, is installed. This corresponds to the eyewitness testimony, the installation of the shower heads, that the Jews were told they're going to take a shower, and that's why they undressed and they're gassed. There's an order placed for hydrogen cyanide detectors in this Leichenkeller 1. And the other gas chambers, we were talking about Leichenkeller 1 of Krimas 2 and 3. Krimas 4 and 5 are also referred to as gas chambers. There's a document calling it a gas chamber. There's a document, the relevant room, right, of Krima 4 and 5, which are the same piece. And then the bunkers, there's documents calling them gas chambers. So, I mean, I don't really know what Cole's talking about, but there's a lot of documents referring to the buildings that are gas chambers as gas chambers. And they were released, frankly, in Pressak's book before Cole's documentary. So I like David, but you can't excuse his statements. Here's, by the way, the order inventory. It's really small, but you can see if you if you blow it up, it's really blurry, honestly. You can see the delivery of shower heads, of fake shower heads for the gas chamber. I mean, there's no piping, guys. Why are they delivering shower heads? All right, and it just happens to correspond. Here's a document related to heating of the deniers say it's a morgue, right? They say Leichenkeller 1, one of these gas chambers, is called Corpse Cellar 1, and it can translate, to be fair to the deniers, to you could translate that to morgue reasonably, or perfectly reasonably. But why is there heating in a morgue, right? Why is, especially preheating? This document refers to the heating it came into. Okay, geez, you want to cook the corpses, I guess? No. So there are multiple documents showing heating in the morgue, hydrogen cyanide detectors in the morgue, shower heads in the morgue. And then, of course, the forensic evidence shows that the hydrogen cyanide residue in the ruins of the gas chambers is higher than any building in Auschwitz on average, other than the delousing chambers, which are intact gas chambers, right? They're intact gas chambers for gassing clothing, for disinfecting clothing. So, and then as Cole did say, there's every witness who worked at these buildings said they were gas chambers, and then people just were going in there and disappearing. So there's that little problem for that. In terms of, let's see if I have. Do I have Goebbels? Okay, yeah. Okay, sure. So Cole also says no order for killing. That's another thing. So he says like Goebbels here in the last sentence. Maybe you guys can see it. The cursor. He's talking about what Hitler is saying about the Jews. What's going to happen with the Jews? This is in December 1941, when World War II has become a world war. To mit ihrem Leben bezahlen müssen. They have to pay with their lives, right? They have to pay with their lives for starting the war. So it sounds pretty homicidal to me. I don't know. I mentioned this document earlier. Hitler's talking about the Eastern Jews. They're going to have to be exterminated as if they were partisans. That's an order for killing Eastern Jews. This is from Hitler. Where is the Horthy document? I hope I have that. Okay, yeah. Another thing, Hitler. So he told that to the Hungarian regent Horthy, and Horthy, and then I debate with Enoch. Enoch says, "Oh, they're Fed posting. They don't really mean it. It's all we're not taking the necessary steps against the Jews. Our crime, therefore, is that I have not fulfilled Hitler's wish and have not allowed the Jews to be massacred." So, yeah. And I also mentioned earlier, Frank. I mean, we're talking about Hitler specifically, to be fair. So I probably shouldn't bring up other people. But it's clear Hitler talked about murdering Jews. It's how systematically killing Jews. That's how it was interpreted by Horthy. That's what the documents show. And I mentioned earlier, Frank. I shouldn't get into all these other ones like Frank and so on. But Frank says that the Jews are no longer going to be fed in Poland. So, and 1.2 million will die of starvation. That's his order, right? He's in charge of occupied Poland. If you want to look at more documents expressing homicidal intent, you can go to my Substack, and I talk about this in the Thomas Dalton debate ad nauseum. So, Cole is wrong that there are no Hitler orders or references to massacring Jews.
And we can't use the excuse that the Nazis destroyed all the evidence, because after we had broken the German code, we were able to intercept their secret understanding the true nature of the things passed off as proofs. Everything that is used as evidence of the Holocaust also can be said to have a perfectly normal explanation.
I mean, what is the perfectly normal explanation for hydrogen cyanide detectors and shower heads in a morgue? Which Cole claimed it was a morgue at the time. Maybe he still does. I'd like to hear what that normal explanation is. Mike Enoch's explanation, by the way, for the hydrogen cyanide detectors and the references to it as a gas chamber was that they were gassing corpses in Leichenkeller 1. So they were gassing Jews, he admitted, but just corpses. So, yeah, if you want to believe that, go ahead.
For example, these exhibits are said to be the material proofs of exterminations. There's the piles of human hair. But what does that prove? It's acknowledged that each inmate had his or her head shaved because of the lice problem. That's not denied, so why wouldn't there be piles of human hair? What about the piles of shoes and clothing? Is that a proof? It's a fact that the prisoners were issued a...
It's kind of irrelevant because it's like these aren't good arguments. If someone were to say shoes and hair are arguments for extermination, those wouldn't be good arguments, but so it's not really relevant as far as I'm concerned.
Uniform upon arrival, including shoes. Plan B was used to disinfect clothes and also buildings. Zyklon B was one of the premier pest control agents in Europe.
Yeah, we know, but okay, it doesn't prove anything. It can be used for killing too. I mean, it's hydrogen is highly lethal to human
There's
beings.
the usual pictures of sick inmates, which proves the groundbreaking thesis that people got sick in the camp. Once again, I'll add that nobody denies the typhus epidemic, which resulted in many deaths.
Typhus epidemic was over by 1943. The vast majority of Jews died in 43-44.
And some of the proofs they present actually work against the concept. For example, they have one of several aerial photographs taken of Auschwitz by
Aerial photographs there's aerial photography that clearly shows disturbances indicating holes in the roof.
by the Allies during the war.
All right, I'm sick of Cole. I'm starting to like Cole less listening to this because it's so fucking dishonest, to be frank. Okay, we'll listen to him though. To be fair, why the fuck not? I did criticize him, so let's listen to his nonsense for 2.5 minutes.
They work against the concept. For example, they have one of several aerial photographs taken of Auschwitz by the Allies during the war. They don't mention, however, that when blown up, these photos don't show people being gassed or bodies being burned, even though they were taken during the time killings were said to be going on almost non-stop. Once inside, we can see why revisionists have had such a field day with this building. Obvious marks on the walls and floors, where apparently walls had been knocked down.
Just really quick for denying history. Yeah, I think I conflated two documents. One's about heating, one's about preheating. So there is a preheating document, but the one I cited just shows that there's heating in Leichenkeller 1. It's not about preheating. Another document shows preheating. So yeah, that's a good thing to clarify, if I wasn't clear.
Equally obvious holes in the...
Although the substantive point is 100% correct that I made. There are two documents related to heating, one preheating, one describes heating. So preheating is more damning, of course, because preheating implies some kind of process, right? Some kind of technical process is about to happen. In my estimation, geez, groundbreaking thesis. It's you want preheat for the gassing because the gas evaporates more quickly with the heating. But yeah, heating is damning too, but preheating is more so. So yeah.
Floor where bathroom facilities had been. We maintain that, unlike the large hollow chamber we now see, this room had once been 5 rooms, including a bathroom. Yet the building does have what appears to be evidence of criminal usage. 4 holes in the ceiling, which lead to the roof, where 4 little chimneys stand. It is said that through these 4 holes, Zyklon B crystals were dropped. And indeed, there seems to be no other explanation for them.
Yeah, they punched. This is Cremo 1. They did reconstruct it and punch holes into the roof. Cole's correct. It's a reconstruction. What he's wrong is in saying that this is some cover up or the museum was trying to hide this from the world. Scholars of Auschwitz had acknowledged this is a reconstruction. For decades, there's a Polish girl who who's a tour guide who falsely says it's an original. That doesn't prove anything other than this Polish girl is just working in there. Shit, dude.
The past that these holes were added after the camp's liberation, and that the inside walls were knocked down and the bathroom facilities removed to make the room look like a big gas chamber. Let's start again talking about this building here. This...
Crematorium gas chamber.
But this is a reconstruction.
It is in original state. Original
Yeah,
state.
so she's mistaken here. It's not an original. The tour guide is mistaken.
It is in original part.
And this is the clear point is that this was known to scholars and was written about, was stated by the museum before Cole did this. So it's not like he chose this. It's a tour guide making an error.
Original in through this chimney was dropped Zyklon B.
Again, that had been confirmed before Cole's documentary, so it's just a dishonest premise. The tour guide made an error.
Are those the original holes in the ceiling?
No.
They've been rebuilt?
Yes.
Okay. After the war?
After the war, yes.
You think this is good evidence? It's a fucking museum. And they said it before Cole's documentary. Someone made a mistake. Whether the chimney is an original feature, it's not fake. Under the direct orders of Stalin. What are they coming up with those?
This is Auschwitz-Birkenau in an Allied.
I don't understand how exactly the architectural worked. It's like the chimney is connected to the building with underground fluids. It's an original feature. Why does it prove anything like in either case? Like, no one denies this building was a crematorium. So I don't understand why the chimney is some knockdown medium for deniers. I never have understood that one. Maybe the chat can help me with that.
Photo from September 1944. The train that would come up carrying the doomed inmates, you would have thousands of inmates being marched off the trains into one of these two gas chambers in full view.
Correct. Denying history. It's the chimney is rebuilt, but the chimney was an original feature. Is my point. So it's not like, it's a reconstruction, not something that's fabricated.
Of the entire camp. This was a spectacle that nobody at the camp could miss. They would see thousands of people marching into those buildings and nobody coming out. These were gas chambers that were not isolated from anyone, and indeed, when these...
This is also completely untrue. There's documentary evidence showing that there's an effort to camouflage gas chambers, Krima 4 and 5, and of course Krima 1 and 2, pardon me, the Leichenkeller 1 and 2, Leichenkeller gas chamber, the one gas chamber in Krima's 2 and 3 were underground, so there was concealment.
These aerial photographs were released in the late 70s. They contradicted many supposed eyewitness claims about how the Nazis had tried to camouflage the gas chambers at Birkenau.
It's not just eyewitnesses, by the way. I actually published a document the other day on that talked about the need to camouflage the Krimas, so it's not just eyewitnesses. I think I may have been the first one to find that. Maybe I wasn't, though. I don't want to say that. I did find it.
Question that should be asked: is there any Zyklon B residue in the gas chamber?
This is another Prussian blue argument. Oh boy, let's listen to this.
Knowing that cyanide gas would, in fact, leave a residue. In 1988, execution equipment expert Fred Lucher conducted forensic examinations.
Oh my God, we got to Leuchter. Did you guys, who made it to Leuchter? Be proud of yourself if you made it to Fred.
Question. He took samples from the 4 gas chambers at Birkenau, the one at the main camp, and a control sample from one of the disinfestation chambers that we know did use Zyklon B. Now, the gas chamber samples showed almost no appreciable traces, whereas the disinfestation sample literally went right off the scale. In 1990, the Institute of Forensic Research in...
So it's utterly false that the gas chambers have no residue of hydrogen cyanide. Multiple tests have been done, including by deniers, including by Leuchter, who has no idea what he's doing for reasons I'll talk about later when they interview him. But there's not only considerable residue of hydrogen cyanide in the ruins of the gas chambers, but there's more than any other type of building in Auschwitz except the non-homicidal gas chambers.
In Krakow decided to conduct their own forensic tests to see if they could refute Fred Lucher's findings, and their own tests got back the same results.
That is utterly false, Mike Hole. Markowitz, you need to look at the Markowitz data, and that shows hydrogen cyanide residue. So that's an utterly false statement, saying that the test commissioned by the Auschwitz Museum showed no hydrogen cyanide. Friedrich A. Leuchter. Ooh. Friedrich Leuchter. It's a German name. He doesn't know it's German because he's a burger. He calls it Leuchter. It's funny. If you're going to be a Nazi, like, own being German or know how to pronounce your German name, bro. Friedrich Leuchter.
I told Mr. Zündel and his defense team prior to my going that if I did in fact find facilities that could have supported executions, not only whether they did support the executions, but only whether or not they could have sustained gas executions, I would make that very clear in my report, and that is what I would testify to when I testified in court.
What, aside from the samples, convinced you that these facilities could not have been used then or now as execution facilities?
You must have gasketed doors, no windows, means of getting the gas in, means of getting the gas...
The windows in Krima 4 and 5 and Cremus 4 and 5 were gas tight, as the documentary evidence shows.
Gas out.
In terms of Cremus 2 and 3, of course, there were the means getting the gas in. You have these wire mesh columns, which acted as like a very crude, pseudo piping system through which the Zyklon Bay bullets were thrown in, and then they could be extracted as well. So that's how you got them in and out.
If those persons operating the facilities didn't gas themselves to death at the same time that the executees died, they certainly would have been blown to bits.
Okay, this is really funny. So first of all, to claim, let's say Crema 2 and 3, to claim that the people would have died who were throwing in the Zyklon Bay pellets from outside is ridiculous. First of all, they're outside, like the air, the fresh air is there to prevent them from ingesting too much hydrogen cyanide. Unlike unlike gassing people in an enclosed area, it's a totally different thing. Second of all, they're wearing gas masks, and third of all, this claim about explosions. The minimal concentration that can result in an explosion of hydrogen cyanide is 56,000 parts per million. The minimum exposure, the exposure that can result in death of a human being is 300 parts per million. So obviously, you can kill people without having a fire hazard.
When the gas exploded from a switch, the heat of a light bulb, or the gas approaching and getting into the crematory furnace. We're talking about brick and mortar buildings without heat.
Without heat is a total lie. I provided the documents already showing heating systems and the need for preheating system, and then the existence of a heating system in Cremus 2 and 3. Also, the body heat from all the people crammed together would warm the room. So he's lying there, or is ignorant.
With non-explosion proof lighting, without gasketed doors, in some cases without doors at all, and with crematories that opened very close or adjacent to the facility. I mean, it's just ludicrous to consider that these facilities could have been used as gas chambers. There was no such a thing as an eyewitness. I have never seen a report that was written by anyone who had a valid description of what could have happened at a gassing.
What's it even mean? What could have happened at a gassing?
The short of it is, there are no eyewitnesses because there were no gassings.
That's like a perfect circle, Fred. Oh, by the way, the guy's methods for gathering samples were utterly incompetent. He didn't control for the depth of samples, which is absurd, given that the hydrogen cyanide only penetrated to the surface of the brick and mortar. So he took these huge chunks from the gas chamber and tried to test the hydrogen cyanide levels. These massive chunks that were then like beaten up and crushed. So it was a totally pseudoscientific methodology. He also took a sample that wasn't from a gas chamber. He took a sample that was soaked in a puddle of water, which is relevant because hydrogen cyanide is water soluble. So the guy was utterly incompetent. There's even deniers, some of them will mention these days, like Germar Rudolph will say Leuchter was totally incompetent. He used to defend him, but now he admits he was totally inept. Friedrich Paul Berg, who was a denier engineer, who admits Leuchter's totally a joke and incompetent. He just is making things up like there's no ventilation. That's not true. There was ventilation in Crema 2 and 3. He says there's no heat. Not true. Heat in Crema 2 and 3. There were gas-tight doors. The windows he's referring to in Cremas 4 and 5 presumably were gas-tight. His methods were totally incompetent. Also, Leuchter doesn't understand that it's that you can kill a person with far less hydrogen cyanide than you can than is a risk of explosion. You can also kill people with far less hydrogen cyanide than is needed to lyse. So yeah, because he made a big deal about the fact that Prussian blue is in some of, not all of, by the way, but some of the delousing chambers. By not all of, I mean it isn't in the delousing chamber at Barracks X in Dachau. But there isn't residue of Prussian blue, solid blue color in the homicidal gas chamber ruins, but it can be explained among other means by the fact that you need far more exposure to hydrogen cyanide to kill insects than warm-blooded animals, humans, namely. So you have to use the hydrogen cyanide longer in the delousing chambers, and because of this, and because of other factors, for example, the fact that the homicidal gas chambers were hosed down, the requisite amount of hydrogen cyanide, and they were also used longer, the delousing chambers, than like in terms of years, they were used longer than the extermination. Than the extermination gas chambers. Yeah, these are the reasons that the requisite levels of concentration of hydrogen cyanide built up to facilitate Prussian blue in the delousing chambers, but not in the gas chambers. So yeah. Such an idiot. That guy's a clown show, man.
I think it's necessary to put this matter in its proper historical perspective. You see, we live in a time now when the old Soviet Union has fallen apart, and it's now okay for both liberals and conservatives, as well as everybody else, to speak ill of the departed communist state. But it was not always that way. During World War II, the Soviets were more than just a military ally. Their anti-Nazi propaganda was readily accepted by the other allies.
I'm going to pause to answer a couple of questions really quick. I'm just looking at Ben 10. What percentage would you say is bad info? Okay, so actually you have to break it up into different parts. So for military history, I would say maybe it's a little bit crude, but I'd say like 60-70% is bad info. They tend to just exonerate Hitler of errors, but there's some true material. In terms of Hitler's like biography pre coming to power, I'd say like 50% is true. It's like true plus romanticized, and there's fake stuff too. Maybe even 60% is true. When it comes to the origins of the war and the Holocaust, it's like all lies, basically. Like every substantive claim is a lie. Like why the Germans invaded Poland, why the Germans invaded Czechoslovakia, why the Germans invaded the Soviet Union, and then the Holocaust is like all lies. So those are the 4 categories. They vary, but yeah, the stuff on Holocaust and then the origins of the war, the responsibility for the war, all lies. Yeah.
Because it served all of their purposes. The point is that as the victors, the Soviets got to commit their propaganda to the history books as fact.
Really deep, man, this part.
With the 2020 hindsight we now have, the knowledge of Stalin's despotism, and the KGB's history of misinformation and deception, as well as the other camps in Poland, Majdanek, Belzec, Chełmno, Treblinka, and Sobibor, we've had to rely on the Soviets for most of our information.
All right, we're going to do this one, boys.
In Krakau liegt vor einem polnischen Gerichtshof der Prozess gegen die Hauptverantwortlichen für das Konzentrationslager Auschwitz zu Ende. Insgesamt kamen nahezu 300.000 Menschen verschiedenster Nationen im
Okay, so the translation is correct. He's talking about 300,000 dead. It's German. But this is registered prisoners. It isn't Jews who arrived and were killed upon arrival. This is people who are registered in the camp. So only about 100,000 Jews are among this figure, because the vast majority of the Jews were killed upon arrival at Auschwitz because they couldn't be of use for the war, and they were just murdered if you're like a little kid, an old person, or like too frail, too sick, etc. So this figure is true, but it's only for registered prisoners, and most Jews were never registered in Auschwitz because they just were killed upon arrival. So yeah, I mean, it's basically lying by omission here.
Konzentrationslager Auschwitz.
Okay, here's this. So this is a false figure by the Soviet, the communist era figure of Auschwitz deaths. I believe it's calculated. Beyond history, maybe you can give me some hints on this. I believe this figure, it's false. It's the main thing is it's false. It's 100% true. But I believe it was calculated by like looking at cremation capacity. We know it's false because grossly false because it's far fewer than 4 million people were ever deported to Auschwitz. So that's crazily false. But first of all, academic historians never took this figure seriously. For the reasons I said, that the deportation figures alone totally destroy this. That's the first point. The second point is this doesn't even mention Jews. The claim is instead that all of these people of different nationalities, Poles, Russians, etc., 4 million of them together died. So it isn't a claim that 4 million Jews died. It doesn't say that anywhere. It's not true, right? It's not true. And the fact that we can say it isn't true, and that we've said that for when the Holland right later come out, like I don't know, almost 70 years, shows that there isn't some conspiracy going on. We're just debunking claims, right? This wasn't even the figure given at Nuremberg, for God's sake, or the IG Farben trial or any of these things. So like this isn't some official legal figure either that was ever provided. It's a false figure. I'm not sure how it was calculated, but it certainly is false. But it doesn't refer to Jews either, so it doesn't prove. And again, the Holocaust industry so-called rejects this, so I don't know how this can be seen as part of the conspiracy when like the Holocaust Museum rejects this and so on. But yeah. I mean, this is like called fixing a factual error. This is a museum, right? We're talking about the museum making this correction. Historians knew this for many decades. This was an unserious figure. Reitlinger ridiculed it for the reasons I mentioned. The deportation data won't bear it out at all. Yeah, because the estimates. First of all, it's not 6 million. It's like 5 to 6 million have been the estimates from historians. But no historian ever took 4 million seriously, so that's why it wasn't reduced. There was no reduction because no demographic estimate done by a historian ever had, by a serious historian, ever had 4 million at Auschwitz. So that's why there hasn't been a reduction, because that was never baked in. It wasn't baked into Hilberg, it wasn't baked into Reitlinger, going back 70, 60 years, it wasn't baked in. So no one took it seriously. It was clearly wrong. That's why the numbers haven't changed when the Soviets, when the Iron Curtain fell and the Polish Museum revised it. It was just a mistake. The museum, or dishonesty, whatever the museum was engaged in. It wasn't something affecting scholarship. All right, I'm getting a little burned out here. Like, oh, okay, this is like this is a bunch of headlines talking about 6 million Jews are suffering or dying. Yeah, I mean, if you actually believe, first of all, this relates to, if you believe that this is proof that these newspapers were involved in the conspiracy decades before the Holocaust, these headlines prove that. I mean, like, you're on drugs. You're just nuts, man. Piers Morgan's involved, I guess. I don't know. I mean, also, like, you have more headlines. Andrew Mathis has shown this. You have more headlines that say 1 million or 2 million. And they're not talking about, like, people being killed by gassing. They're talking about, suffering or massacre or starvation or threatened. I mean, there are all kinds of different descriptions. But it's not just 6 million either, so. Okay, Ahmadinejad does an interview about Holocaust-denial. Who cares? David Cole is coerced. Yeah, he shouldn't have been. That's been odd. Okay, here we go. These people being persecuted for being crackpots. They shouldn't be. It's wrong. Zündel was legendary statist Loischer. Loischer's like considered a clown by deniers too. This film's out of date. Okay, here's a real whopper. Holocaust is the only event in history to be enforced by law. Not true. Many forms of genocide denial are criminalized in many countries. For example, in Poland, if you denied that didn't happen or that's the Soviets were responsible, that's against the law. In France, if you denied the Armenian genocide, for example, that's against the law. There are many forms of genocide denial that are against the law. Okay. All right. I shouldn't laugh because I am against this. People shouldn't go to jail for this, but it's just the music's so dramatic. All right. Yep. Yeah, these people went to jail. All right. I think we're getting a little weird here. I mean, this priest says it. All right. He's a denier. Great. E. Michael Jones can go have a beer with him. Okay, now I think I'm going to skip the last book because I think it's just about like Hiroshima. It's about things that don't really have anything to do with the Nazis anymore. And like also the West is bad now because we fought on the wrong side. Yeah, so the post-Hitler order has been bad. So I think I'll probably and see if there are any questions from you guys before we call it a night. Give me your questions, all right? Was the Glassnote, this is a correction, was the Glassnote law repealed in France where the Armenian genocide denial was banned? Is that true, denying history? How was is it called the Glass Law? What the fuck is it called? Okay, regardless, Dying isn't responding, but it could be that I made a factual error there, that Armenian genocide denial used to be illegal but no longer is in France. The point is, other forms of genocide denial have been and are illegal. That is true, but that micro point may have been false. Yeah. I think a lot of people have packed it in. I may wrap the thing up. I'm a little tired anyway. But yeah, I think it was a good stream. I think I debunked a lot. I think any like mildly sane person watching this would not buy the revisionist claims of why the war started, would not find the Holocaust-denial of the film persuasive. So I hope I'm talking to sane people. There's a chance I am, a chance I'm not. But all right, we're gonna wrap. Everybody, thank you for watching and tuning in, and for those who are not tuning in live, I appreciate it too. Take care.